Hello, BookTube. Well, we come to it at last, the final day of Cimmerian September. This was an inaugural BookTube event created by Michael K. Vaughan, of course, a resident Conan superfan, that was intended to urge you to go back to Robert E. Howard's original Conan writings in their original formats. So not any of the pastiches that were done in the wake of his death, but rather there are a couple of editions that you can get now readily available of the works as Robert E. Howard wrote them, at least as far as he was ever content with that. And I broke down the numbers for the big fat Gollancz one-volume paperback, and you can read that thing in a month with very little in the way of daily exertion. But I did not do that for Cimmerian September. I went to Savage Sword of Conan, Marvel Comics black and white magazine that they did forever and ever for hundreds of issues. And for some perverse reason decided to read a huge chunk of these things. I may end up extending Cimmerian September so that I read them all, so that I read the whole run on Savage Sword of Conan, even though it's quite uneven. Even though it's quite uneven. But even if I don't finish the run, I still read an enormous number of Conan stories. Savage Sword of Conan, that often led me to the color comic book that Marvel did at the same time, Conan the Barbarian. But Savage Sword of Conan, every issue, even the later issues after issue number 200, they have a lot of stuff in them. And the earlier issues, this is issue number 27, part of Beyond the Black River, that I think took Roy Thomas 3 issues to adapt. But only because he wasn't using the whole of the issue to do it. That every one of these issues has a vast amount of other stuff in it. Adaptations of other Robert E. Howard characters, and also text. Lots and lots of text. The founder of our event, Michael K. Vaughan, was just here. I meant to ask him if the big Marvel omnibus hardcovers of these that came out just a few years ago, almost all of them came out in those hardcovers, and I think he has almost all of them. I meant to ask him if they include the text features, but I'm sure that they do. They must. Where the writer, Roy Thomas, would often write at great length, or he would get other people to write what essentially amounted to freelance articles about some aspect of Conan's world, or his creation, or Robert E. Howard. And so you get a lot of stuff in every issue. I could easily have spent the whole month just absorbing all of these things. I largely did. And as a result, for the last day of Cimmerian September, I thought I would give you an idea of what I've learned. I've learned 10 things from reading Savage Sword of Conan. I thought we'd go through those. And number 10 is pretty obvious. Never trust wizards. Never. Even if they seem benign, even if they're offering to help you, never trust a wizard. They are fundamentally untrustworthy. I think that goes without saying in sword and sorcery. It's not sword and sorcery, really. It's sword versus sorcery, unless you're Cain. Tip number, or lesson, life lesson of Savage Sword of Conan, life lessons. Oh my God, is that what this is? Number 9 is don't drink offered wine. It's one thing to pay for wine at the local tavern. There are always taverns in Conan stories, always. But don't ever drink wine that someone offers you, especially if it's a pretty woman, but anyone. It is drugged, no matter what. No matter what you might think, no matter how sure your ground may be. Just turn it down. Just turn it down. Then life lesson number 8 is more of an observation, which is going to be a little bit awkward in our world, because one of the factors of our world that is also true of Robert E. Howard's imaginary Hyborian age, although less true all the time in our world. Your children or your grandchildren will live to see a world in which it is not a factor at all. But one of the ways in which it is currently the same is that these are worlds ruled by religion. Different kinds of religion. And one thing I learned from reading Savage Sword of Conan is that all religious rituals are summonings. All of them are. There's no such thing as a commemorative religious ritual, or a healing religious ritual. They all summon someone. So take that what you want. Then lesson number 7 is also an observation, which is that in the world of the Hyborian age, tetanus and gangrene don't exist. Conan is hacked and slashed and shot with arrows a million times. He's bitten and mauled by a million kinds of animals, natural and supernatural. And All he needs is the bracing touch of salt water to sting and clean his wounds. There's no such thing. He can be slashed by the filthiest sword in the world. There's no such thing as tetanus. There's no such thing as the thing that killed so many humans in the course of humanity, since humanity started smelting iron without really taking into account what that would do if it got inside their body. So Conan, in the Hyborian Age, can leap into the fray with swords and knives hacking at him in all directions and walk away cut and bleeding and sore, but just fine. Whereas in, well, this is 2023, so let's say 923, AD 923, a farmer in northern France accidentally steps on a nail. And it's the tiniest puncture in the world. He is 45 years old. He's looking forward to 10 more years of active work. He has a family. He is well loved in town, and his life is full of interests and pursuits. And after 7 agonizing days, he dies of that tiny little pinprick. But not Conan. so just so you know. Then life lesson number 6 from Conan, the Savage Sword of Conan, is don't ever call a woman by her given name, no matter what. She'll tell you her name, but don't ever use it. No matter how often you are with her, no matter how many times you address her, don't ever use her name. Instead, always, for the whole time you're together, call her girl if she is a non-combatant. If she's a willowy little thing who can't handle her own in battle, then you call her girl. If she can handle her own in battle, you might want to upgrade that to calling her woman. But never her name. Go figure. Then life lesson number 5 is going to be obvious from this great Norm cover. Is that who did this? Oh no, this is Bob Larkin in the Norm style. Maybe Norm inked it. Well, anyway, life lesson number 5 is that no species in the history of the world has ever actually 100% gone extinct. None of them have. Not one species of hominoidea, of all kinds of animals, of reptiles, of dinosaurs, none of them are completely extinct, at least until Conan comes around. He ends a number of species in the course of his career. But before then, nope. You can be walking around in the Hyborian Age and you can say to yourself, well, the one thing I'm not going to encounter is a rampaging stegosaurus. And then you will on a Thursday morning, guaranteed. Then life lesson number 4 is don't trust mercenaries or pirates, even if you are one, as you often will be. You often will be either a mercenary or a pirate. Don't trust them anyway. They will always betray you. It's just the way of it. I'm not saying that you will betray people, but everyone else in those professions, mercenary or pirate, will definitely betray you. So don't do it. Then life lesson number 3 is that nothing good ever comes from the dark between the stars. You can hear anything at all about something. It comes from the darkest jungle, or it comes from the ruins of Vendia, or it comes from the depths of time. You can hear any of those things, and it'll be metza. You'll be able to handle it. It won't be a real weak downer. But if you hear that something you're about to encounter comes from the dark between the stars, that's bad news. That's really bad news in the world of Savage Sword of Conan. That's reserved for the worst of the worst. Then point number 2, life lesson number 2, I have learned because when reading Savage Sword of Conan, like I mentioned, Roy Thomas had to fill these issues every single month. After a very short time, this went monthly, and he had to fill these issues every single month. And when you look through one of these issues, you see what a job that was to do. This is not, I mean, he already had to fill a color comic with Conan shenanigans, but here he has to fill it even more. Just a gigantic amount of space. And without a whole lot of money to dole out at any point. Even when this started winning critical praise and awards, there still wasn't a whole lot of money to dole out. So he had to go all over creation for backup features and stories in this. And I mentioned what a few of those are, but quite often the natural draw was for him to commission or find or create backup stories of other Robert E. Howard characters. Robert E. Howard wrote a brace of heroic characters. None more memorable than Conan, none that's immortal other than Conan, but still, they all have their own milieu. You can get an artist and a writer to do it, and it feels thematically connected. It feels thematically justified. And that brings us to life lesson number 2, which is that Solomon Kane, the fighting Puritan who Robert E. Howard created, is a lame character. He is a lame character. He has the 2 flintlock pistols. He has a sword. He is an ordinary guy. He is not incredibly strong like Conan. Tetanus and gangrene, I'm sure, do exist for him. And he's often a backup feature in Savage Sword of Conan, and I have been encountering him, therefore, more often than usual. And I have racked my brains this month to try to figure out why the Dude Bros love Solomon Kane. Why they do when they've got Conan standing right there. Why is it that he tickles their ivories in such a way? And as far as I can tell, it's the weird hat. It's just that. It's just the weird hat. I don't know. But that Solomon Kane, in a few of these issues, does team up with Conan. And so does everybody else. Everybody makes an appearance in these stories. And like I mentioned, Roy Thomas had to fill this issue every month. So, and I know from experience that you can't always be completely picky when that's true. You've got a deadline. It's coming down on you. If you miss that deadline and there aren't even dumb inventory pieces to fill the pages, well, that means that what does exist is going to go into these long, flat cardboard boxes and go to the printer. And when the finished copy comes off the presses, 7 pages are going to be blank. The printer doesn't care. The printer is not going to say, well, this is really bad. What are you doing? You can't run blank pages. The printer's just going to print what you give him in the order that you give it to him. But if the editor's copy of the latest issue of Savage Sword of Conan lands on Stan Lee's desk and there are 8 blank pages, Roy Thomas gets fired that day. Doesn't matter how many things he's doing. Doesn't matter how indispensable he is. That was, back in the olden days, the sin unpardonable. The one sin unpardonable. You lost your job if that happened. So Roy Thomas often had to fill these issues with things. Not always the best artwork. Not always his best writing. Not always best commissioned writing from other people. Solomon Kane. And that brings me to the final life lesson of Savage Sword of Conan, which I've really, knowing that's true of these issues and seeing what it sometimes drove Roy Thomas to include, really drove home the final lesson, which is that Conan the Barbarian, the last great character that Robert E. Howard created, his greatest character, one of the only fictional characters of the 20th century to achieve immortality along the lines of half a dozen fictional characters of the Victorian era. One thing you can definitely say about Conan the Barbarian when he's done right, Roy Thomas almost always does him right. When he's done right, the final life lesson is that when he's done right, Conan the Barbarian can save any story. Just any story. You've got some tedious, Romeo and Juliet story or warring tiny kingdoms or whatever it is. You throw Conan into the mix, this gigantic, glowering Cimmerian he's not going to quail at the sight of some blood-curdling supernatural threat. Instead, he's going to stick 10 inches of iron in its stomach and see if it lives through that. And maybe with a dour quip along the way. And you'll get that from Roy Thomas. He does get this character. I have learned that when Conan is on character, even in a really bad, weak story, he'll still save it. He'll still save it. I don't want to end Cimmerian September on a note of heresy, but I think that's easily observable in Robert E. Howard's own original oeuvre. Some of those stories are not all that good, even on paper, in the original, those Del Rey paperbacks that we've been urging you to get. There are Conan stories, and there are Conan stories, and even the weak ones he manages to save because there's a magic about this character. So there are your life lessons drawn from Savage Sword of Conan. And the final one is the right one to end on because, boy, oh boy, was this a great month of reading. All the rest, I was still doing all the rest of my stuff. I was still doing all the work reading that I have to do. But I was adding a little bit of Conan to every night's pile, and it was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So I want to thank Michael K. Vaughan and also, simultaneously apologize to him for making a million videos during the month of September. Of course, I apologize to the rest of you, too, for flooding the airwaves. But when I love a subject like this, I tend to lose molecular cohesion and really just spray videos in all directions. But that's done as of now. I don't know if Savage Sword of September, I don't know if Cimmerian September will be the same as Michael K. Vaughan's other great event, June on the Range, where with June on the Range, we reread Westerns, and I love doing it so much that I tend not to read Westerns the rest of the year. And maybe I've got the Conan bug out of my system. The only thing I can think that might not be true is that I might finish reading every issue of Savage Sword. The rereads and all of the ones that I'm not familiar with. I've been hopping all around for the month, but that's 30 issues. Not even 30 issues in the month out of 230. So there's a lot more for me to do. I might continue to do that, little bits and pieces here, but my beautiful thumbnail, Conan being mobbed by vicious beagles, gets retired for another year. So hope you all enjoyed Cimmerian September. I wasn't really sure how many people were observing our secular holiday, but Mike showed me that there are quite a few people who have been participating in Cimmerian September. That's fantastic. So I hope that you all enjoyed it. I hope that if you, especially those of you who went to the Conan stories for the first time, I hope you found some magic there. So I'll wrap this up for now. We'll say goodbye to our Cimmerian adventurer, and we'll be back. I'll be back with other things. Thank you, BookTube.